This next letter was right after the Battle of Bull Run. What's interesting is Pat didn't talk a lot to us about the different battles he was in. Sometimes he would talk to us about afterwards, but he still would not talk very much about it. But in this letter was fascinating. For any of you that have read the papers about the Battle of Bull Run, it was a catastrophe for the North. Pat writes in his letter that he actually watched the boys trying to get a couple rowboats across the river to attack the bluff, actual Ball's Bluff. And Pat witnessed the one boat capsize and all the boys go into the water and a number of the boys not get out of the water. Brandy would come in very good in such times as when we were in Virginia, for we were mostly famished with cold, lying on the bare ground with nothing to cover us but the heavens. And I tell you, a glass of good brandy in the morning would not go very bad. It is very often that my companions would give $2 for a pint of brandy. I have not tasted a drop of brandy since I left New York, but for the day of the Battle of Bull Run. And I asked a drink of one of the German rifles. He gave me his canteen and told me to drink enough, and I took a good drink. It was half water and half brandy. And if it was poison at the same time, I would drink it. He talks about how some of the soldiers who are very close to the officers and are very nice to the officers, they get furloughs. And so in this letter, Patrick talks about that. I am not a person to suck around the officers, for I would not turn on my heel to gain their interest. For as long as I do my duty, I do not care a straw for any of them. And at the same time, I do not want to be contrary. This letter is actually a Christmas letter, his first Christmas letter to us. And in it, he talks about how he's excited because he's heard that they may be strengthening the forts around New York City because he heard that Great Britain, England, was going to come into the war. And he says, I hope this will happen, for it is the only thing that will put an end to this war, for there is not an Irishman in the South who will not fight against England. He talks, and this is the winter time, he says, these 2 months cost me a good deal. We have been building box houses and such things for the winter. So they were spending their own money to create the box houses, the quarters that they had to live in through the winter. This part of the letter was a little sad to receive on Christmas. Father, it is now I miss being home, for there is a good many things that my mother used to do for me that I have to pay dear for doing out here. Then I did not know what it was to have a father's advice and a mother's care. But now I know all these things, and it is now I appreciate my father and mother. It was very nice to get it at Christmas from our son. We got this, about this time we got this letter from him. This is at the Battle of Seven Pines. And it's one of the rare places he actually talks about the battle. We beat them back every time they came upon us, and until at last we charged, driving them completely through the woods with terrible loss. This was the first time that they had been defeated that day. He's talking about the Confederate boys. It is said in other papers that brigades made great charges, but they never give us a bit of credit that we won. They give it to Burns' brigade, who did not make a single charge during the day, but we are satisfied. We did our duty. Now, Patrick's letters to his sister, and this is Patrick's sister, Mary, my daughter Mary. And in one of her letters, she's talking about a young man that she's seeing, and she calls him the carpenter. She doesn't use his name. Well, in our neighborhood, everybody knows everybody. So chances are Patrick knows this young man, and she doesn't want Patrick to know his name. So she simply calls him the carpenter. I did not know about the carpenter, so I can't tell you his name either. But I do know that she writes about him in her letters to him, and he writes to her in his letters to her. This one, he says, Dear Mary, you never mentioned, this is part of the teasing that he does to his sister in a lot of his letters. You never mentioned that you were married or had any notion to get married. If I thought you were married, I would try to get a furlough to go and see yourself and the old man and the young ones. So if you are not, I wish you would hurry up and get married, for I do not want to get there ahead of you. So hurry up and be married before I get home. You say John is not married, his younger brother. Well, I think it is high time for him to get married, but not in this time, as mostly all the young men is coming to fight. But I wish they knew as much as I do. If they did, they would not be in such a hurry to fight. And he ends it with, "I expect to see New York before I die, for this war cannot last very long." He sent us another letter shortly after that. It was right after the Battle of Antietam. "Dear Father, I've been very sick every day since the battle. I had to ride in an ambulance coming here, and all for the want of nourishment and proper food. And plenty of it to be got, if I only had money. But I believe the government don't intend to give us any money. Every other brigade in our division has been paid except us." Now this is after Antietam, and Patrick was right in the heat of the fighting there. The 82nd New York, they were fighting right by the Dunker Church. They lost 40% of their regiment during that battle. He lost a lot of his friends, so he's clearly upset with what he's saying, and that the fact that after this battle they're not being fed is terribly upsetting to him. And only because the government's not paying for it. And when he says if you had money, in one of his other letters, he talks about that one of his companions is married and has 2 children and does not live far from us at City Hall. And this husband sends money home for his family to survive and eat. But they had nothing to eat in his company. And this father said, "I will keep the money so that we can all eat." And the boy said, "No, you send it home to your family." And he says, "No, there are charity kitchens. There are Christian kitchens up in New York City that will feed them, so they can at least get food. We cannot." So it kind of shows you what it was like for the poor soldiers out there. December 25th, 1862. "Good morning, Father, and a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you all. Dear Father, last night was Christmas Eve, but it did not appear so to me. I never put in so lonely a Christmas Eve in my life. I was on guard, and I often thought of home during the night. There was hardly a stir in the regiment, if I'm to accept a few who, wiser than the rest of us, spared the money and put it to good use last night. But they were but a few. Last Christmas I did not feel it much, for I had plenty of everything, but that I missed your faces. But it was far different this time. Everybody felt so lonesome. And I tell you, it was often during the night that I thought of all of ye. Sometimes I would picture to myself that I walked in among you, and that all of you was there, but all of a sudden I would be aroused by the call of the sentry to halt and give the countersign. It is then that I would feel bad and look about me for all the faces that I saw in my imagination a few moments before, but they were all gone, not one to be seen. It was in this way that I spent the night, and in this morning, when I was relieved, I thought I would lay down and have a sleep, but no sleep would come to my eyes. So I had to get up. Then I began to think, what would I do? For I have no person to go see. So I thought that a few lines that I am writing would be welcomed by all of you when I cannot go and see you. Your loving son, Pat. It says, "Dear sister, you say that you had a good time of it on St. Patrick's night at the ball given by the members of the 69th Regiment. This was a big ball that they would put on in New York City. I have seen a good deal in the papers about the ball. I suppose it was well crowded. But you did not tell me who was your companion at the ball. You need not try to make me believe that father brought you, for I will not believe it. You say that Cousin John had his girl there, so I know it was not him who accompanied you. But I think I could make a good guess at this person. Now let me see. It must be the carpenter. Now don't deny it. You say that my intended brother-in-law would be very glad to see me. Well, I would like to see him. But when I do see him, I hope there would be no such thing as intended about him. I suppose you know what I mean. Dear Mary, you say that you would like to see the Sessions girl I had out here. Well, I think you need not be troubled with her company, for I gave her the sack. So you need not trouble yourself about her any more, for she is played out. You say that Cousin John can get no girl but widow or grass widow. Now, how is that? Was the girl that he had at the ball a grass widow? I suppose he is going to be an old bachelor if he does not look out. It ought to be very easy to get a girl now, for mostly all the young men is gone soldiering. Mary, I think I will not stay long in New York when I get home, unless I should get work right away, for I think I will go to California. I remain your loving brother, Pat.